Yo, what is up, my dudes? I'm back with another video. I'm gonna be taking a break from Death End Request 2, as I just recently beat the game. It was a really close fight, actually. I only had like 50 HP left on one of the phases. Luckily, but today that is not going to be the topic of the video. The topic of the video is going to be something that I've gone over before, mainly about me and some of my other friends, seizures. Oh boy, I had a seizure like 2 or 3 years ago in late October. Basically, which I've already told on the channel before, so I won't go into it again. Another friend of mine, who I don't really know personally, but I know him from, like YouTube and stuff. He was a construction worker, and then he had a seizure, and he had the same aura type feeling that I had before mine. And he was even unluckier than me because he had 2 seizures. I only had 1. And stuff like that. But he had 2. He had the feeling again in the middle of the night, and he had to go to the hospital basically after having a second one. Who else? Another friend of mine from Mystery Diagnosis, who I've talked about before, was another friend of mine was on the show Mystery Diagnosis, and she would wake up or she would actually throw up in the middle of the night, and she had this weird form of epilepsy, as her seizures were actually her throwing up, so they didn't really know. Her family members and friends didn't really know what they were until they went to a sleep study and actually found out that her throwing up was actually her having a seizure, which is like one of the second weirdest types of seizures that I've heard about, because personally for me, I have had the weirdest type of seizure that I've personally heard about. And if you're wondering what type that I had, why it was so weird, well, that is because I was completely conscious during my seizure, and it freaked me out, because I'm like, well, that felt like a seizure, and I was really freaked out because I was completely aware. At that point in my life, I didn't know that it was even possible to have a seizure while completely conscious. Because all of my friends who've had them were unconscious during theirs. But the seizure that I had was a focal aware seizure. You're just completely aware of the actual seizure. And that is probably one of the weirdest ones that I've ever come across. And ironically, it's happened to me. So, now the seizure stories will be getting better from here. Another friend of mine, who I actually made I did a fanfic of this type of this specific episode of Mystery Diagnosis again. Yes, I have another friend who had multiple seizures from that same show. This friend his seizures. One sec, guys. Sorry, guys, I'm back. I had an interruption. So back to my friend's seizure story. His was like the second, his seizure was like my second most interesting seizure, as his was really, really weird. His was on the level of weird of my seizures, is why I saved this story for second to last. This friend's seizure, he had while he was cooking dinner one night, right? And then he had just had stomach pains, really, really bad stomach pains. So he went up to his room and he went into the restroom, right? And then he just felt nauseous. He felt nauseous. He felt and something else that I don't really remember at this point, but he had this weird feeling, and next thing he knows, he's on the bathroom floor. Basically, his wife found him and everything, and needless to say, the feeling comes to him again. He actually goes to call for his wife around 45 minutes later, and he has the feeling come on again. So he goes to get up out of bed and goes to the bedroom door, yells her name, and just is out cold that quickly, guys. It was like a few seconds, and she came into the room, and he was just gray. He had and he had started convulsing, basically. He had like a grand mal seizure. That's another type of seizure. And needless to say, he kept having them off and on through his life until one day he was doing a sleep study, and they actually and he'd had one of the tests on a tilt table to where they could induce one of his seizures. And this is where it actually gets really, really, really dark, as he again he felt a little nauseous, and then he was just out cold again. But this is the dark part. It wasn't just him just falling unconscious. It was him freaking out every doctor and nurse that was there. And you might be like, well, why? Well, this is the dark part. His heart fucking stopped during his seizure, dude. This is like the second weirdest seizure that I've ever heard about. And it wasn't really a true seizure, but it was something else. It was a something that is called a cardiac arrhythmia. Basically, his heart would periodically stop to where he would feel nauseous, and then it would be him feeling that weird feeling, getting up out of bed, being nauseous, and then followed by a loss of consciousness, and that is when his heart would actually stop. And every single time he would collapse, his heart stopped. So it was really, really risky. It was really, really dangerous, and he was just really lucky to be alive at that point in time. And his story, I actually listened to his story the first time after I had my seizure, which is why it's one of my favorite mystery diagnosis episodes. It's why it's one of my favorites. It's like, wow, that's just it was just such a crazy story. And then my last story is another friend of mine. Connor. He has had multiple seizures in his life, and this one just happened today, guys. We were at the program that I go to, and he was in the bathroom for a really, really long time. Well, I thought that he was just, a going number 2 or something, because I mean, that usually takes a while. And he just steps out of the bathroom, and he's like, dude, I just had a seizure while in the bathroom. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, that's probably why it had taken him so long to get out of the bathroom. And yeah, that was a personal one that I didn't really see his seizure, but I was there before and after. I was there during it. I just didn't see it. And that just happened today, guys. So, but yeah, those are most of my friends who have had seizures, as well as myself. I went into my story before. If you want another full analysis on my story, go watch my seizure video. I still have it up on my channel as well. So, but yeah, that is going to be it though, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for a boss rush of Death End Request 2. Yes, I will be doing a boss rush of that game. So yeah, stay tuned for that, guys, and stay safe out there, guys. Peace out.